Hello, my dear friends. Hello, Alan.
Good morning, Miss Letty.
Hello, Annie.
All right, mate.
Right. Can you see what we're going to talk about today, Annie?
Yeah, about nightmare holiday part 2.
Right. Have you ever had a nightmare holiday?
Well, I personally haven't. I've had a nightmare traveling experiences, but they weren't exactly a holiday. I was just visiting family back in the UK. But things like missing flights and missing your connection for buses and all that.
That has happened to you, Alan. You've missed a flight?
Yes, well, I was in the airport and there was a power cut and everything went into total darkness. And we sat there for maybe 3/4 of an hour. And whether I went to sleep, I don't know. But when I eventually got round to checking the readout up on the big board, my flight had gone. So there was a bit of a panic on, I missed it. So I had to go back to the airline office or desk, and they managed to put me on another flight. But of course, it had a knock-on effect that I'd arranged to catch a bus to take me from the airport 300 kilometers down to the south of England. So I missed that also. So by sheer luck, a couple that were on the flight with me were from the same part of the world. And I happened to bump into them in the reception area or, arrivals. And, they said, everything all right? I said, well, not really. I said, I've missed my bus now. And it was really heavy snowing, quite heavy. Great thick flakes were coming down and it was settling. And I thought, oh, my goodness, I could see myself spending a night in the airport lying on a bench somewhere or on the floor. Anyway, they said they'd got a car they come up to the airport by car and they would take me back down to Cornwall where I lived, not to my doorstep, but within about 30 miles of where I live. And so they took me all the way down to Cornwall, which is, as I say, probably about 250 miles. And they dropped me off at the nearest train station where I was able to catch a train finally to my destination. But yes, it's a horrible feeling when you feel that you've missed an important means of transport, particularly with an airline. So yes, it was not a nice experience, but I did get home eventually.
So after that big problem, at least you had like a solution to it. You were so lucky. So it's like a knock-on effect.
Well,
You
there was
first
really
had a delay.
a lot of luck entailed.
You did have a lot of
luck. I had to
luck.
vet this couple. I'd have to stay the night in the airport.
Right. So it was like a knock-on effect. First your aeroplane, which affected the bus, which affected something else.
Yes.
But luckily, you had the possibility of going with this couple and they helped you out. But
Yes.
it is very stressful and it can spoil a holiday or a visit to somebody. Right
Yes.
then, Annie, would you like to start to read?
Okay. Martin had a terrible day yesterday. It was the day of his holiday to Spain, but it was a nightmare. He left the house at 10 o'clock in the morning and caught a taxi to the airport. Martin went to the check-in with his luggage. When the man who worked for the airline asked for his passport, Martin became very upset. Where was his passport? Martin realized he didn't have his passport with him. What a disaster! He jumped back into the taxi and told the driver to take him home. The driver drove quickly and Martin arrived back at his house in 20 minutes. He ran into the house and went into his bedroom. He found his passport on the bedside table and left the house again. But the taxi wasn't there. Where was the taxi? Martin jumped up and down angrily.
So we'll ask Alan to read a little bit, right? So, Alan, can you continue, please?
Yes. Martin jumped up and down angrily. I don't believe it. The taxi left, he shouted. He ran down the street and looked for another taxi. After a few minutes, Martin found another taxi and told the driver to take him to the airport as quickly as possible. The traffic on the road was very bad, and unfortunately, Martin's taxi arrived at the airport late. His plane left for Spain at 11:30 and Martin missed it. He was very sad and went to speak to the airline. They promised to get him a seat on an evening flight, and Martin went home on another taxi to wait.
Right. So it's not the same as you, Alan, but he did miss his flight. So I'm just going to have a look at a few words here. Annie, how would you describe a nightmare? What could we say a nightmare is?
A nightmare is kind of bad experiences that we have, that we experience something that is kind of that nobody wants to have this kind of experience. For example, like this, like in this story, and when someone forgot to bring the passport or anything that they need, for example. But also it could be another thing that distract the enjoyable of travel, for example, the pleasant time.
Right. So it's an unpleasant time or a bad experience. Also, it could have another meaning, which is when you are sleeping, instead of thinking about nice things, you are dreaming about bad things. So it's a negative thing. A nightmare is something that you may think doesn't have a solution. Right. Alan, luggage. How would you describe luggage?
Well, luggage is the typical piece of luggage is a suitcase. And nowadays, of course, we have to conform to a strict size of suitcase and in some cases, the weight of the contents. But it's usually in the region of, I don't know, 500 millimeters by 330 by 220 or something. But,
so it's 50 by 45 by 40.
Sorry?
It's 50 by 45 by 40.
Oh, you're in centimeters. Yes, I couldn't think quite what it was. But yes, I mean, it's got to be big enough, but not that big that it won't be accepted by the airline. And of course, it's got to take all your clothes for your holiday, which might be for a week or 2 weeks. Right. Luggage could be in the form of a backpack or a handbag, a sort of hold-all bag. They come in all shapes and sizes, but generally regarded as luggage. It either has to go in, you either store it in the hold of the aircraft while it's flying, or if it's not too big or heavy, it can go in the overhead lockers. But yes, it's got to be strong enough to be taken because they're treated quite roughly when they're loading and offloading in airports. So you need a case, C-A-S-E, that's going to be strong enough to withstand all the buffeting. Otherwise, you could end up with damaged articles within your suitcase.
Right. So there's two kinds of suitcases we could take on holiday. One that goes in the hold, H-O-L-D, which means under the seating or in the bottom of the aeroplane. Or we could take hand luggage, which is normally no more than 10 kilos, which is a smaller case, and it goes in the overhead locker. So a lot of vocabulary there, Alan, and thank you for your explanation. Right, the next word I'm going to look for, Annie, which I think we might need to express to anyone. Maybe it's not too difficult, this reading. So I think we're okay with that. So let's move on to our next thing that we have to do today, which is describe a picture.
Oh.
So we will let Annie go first, and if you want to add something later on, Alan, you can, but we'll let Annie do this one. So could you describe this picture?
It is kind of, I think This is in waiting room at the airport, and while waiting for the time to fly, and they spend time. Some people they're lying down, maybe they're tired. Some also sitting there, and with a pillow, using the bag as a pillow.
Right. Can I
The other
help
one,
you?
yes.
This is a departure lounge, right? So this is a
Oh.
departure lounge. We gather this because people look like they are waiting, so they are departing. So I'm going to
Mm.
help you with that. So this is the departing lounge. Now, are there a few people or a lot of people?
A lot.
So how do we describe a lot of people?
Crowded.
Right, so crowded. Now I've put another word there. And when
Oh,
there's a lot of people, jam-packed. It's
right.
very colloquial, that. Jam-packed. So this airport looks jam-packed or crowded. And as you said, they're in the departure lounge and they're lying on the floor and they're using their luggage or bags as pillows. Why would they be there like that?
Maybe the flight got delayed.
So
Probably.
the flight could be delayed. So they are waiting in the departure lounge. And because of this image, we would suppose that it's a long wait of many hours. This is why people are lying down. Right, Alan, would you like to add anything else before we continue?
Well, no, this is quite common these days, unfortunately, either due to technical problems with the aircraft or the delay of another aircraft arriving late, which means they cannot land. And so all you can do is wait, and some of them wait many, many hours, and all they can do is crash out, as we say, and they might just lie on the floor or on seats, anywhere they can just rest. But it is a stressful time.
Yes, so sometimes we get nervous thinking about this possibility, no? And I'm using this word a lot today, a knock-on effect. You could be waiting for a flight from Greece, and because of bad weather, it affects your flight out to another place completely different. So lots of things can happen when you are flying. Right. The next picture is for Alan.
Oh,
And Annie can answer something, say something if she wants to in a minute. Alan, off you go.
well, we're looking at a typical coastal beach. It's probably in my part of the world, Spain or Ibiza or somewhere, and the beach is absolutely packed with holidaymakers. Hundreds of them in the water, of course, bathing, and we can see by the number of parasols, they're all geared up for the tourists, and people do like some shade. And so it's quite common now on beaches that you pay a fee, could be €5 on average, to hire one of these parasols for one day. And they will give you what they call, we call it a sunbed in England, but they have a different name for it here, which I can't think of at the moment. But
Tombona.
there's always a sunbed ready for you, and it will take two people on average, and you can get shade under the parasol. But yes, it's just typical of a scene which I would see in my part of the world during the summer.
But have you been to a beach which has been so jam-packed as that one?
Well, yes, almost. In my
Wow.
beach, unless you get there very early, you're sat right at the back. You see, people like to sit right on the front line, as we call it, so they've got the best view. They don't want to be restricted by people milling backwards and forwards. So unless you get there early, you could be stuck right at the back, and you're just sitting amongst a sea of umbrellas and people swarming around.
Oh, I'm sorry, I wouldn't go if it was like that. Annie, would you like to add something else?
Yeah, I think Alan already explained very well, but I think it is not my cup of tea. This kind of holiday because it's so crowded. I prefer to to go to the bit off beaten path, if possible, because it is kind of uh I cannot move freely. I think because it's so many people there. But in the on the picture, I see there is no big wave. It's still like calm. The wave is calm.
Right. So the sea looks very calm, no waves. But as you said, this isn't your cup of tea, and you would prefer not to go if there's so many people. So, Alan, would you go to a beach like that?
Well, I try to avoid them. In fact, I would sooner walk the extra mileage and go further up the beach where it's quiet. You generally find this where people they do not want to walk far. They just want to drive their car to the car park and take the nearest spot on the beach. But for me, I get away from these crowds if possible and find a nice quiet spot on the beach.
Yeah, I think I would find it claustrophobic, no? And Annie, how do you think the weather is there in the picture?
In the picture, it is sunny, maybe because they all on the sheltering under the parasol. So I
Mhm.
think it's a sunny day, and then so that's why they spend time on the beach.
Alan, would you know by any chance what it's called when it's like very hot and it's a bit cloudy at the same time? I was thinking
Oh
of that,
yeah.
but I don't know the word for that at the
Humid,
moment.
well, humidity rises with heat, of course, and just lately we've had a lot of what we call hazy sunshine,
That's the
very
word I
hot,
wanted.
and the
Hazy.
sun is sort of it's there, but it's like in a bit of a haze. But you still get sunburnt just the same.
I think they're the worst days because you don't realize. So hazy sun, that's what I was looking for. It doesn't look very clear the day. It looks very hot, boiling even. And I think that's why so many people are in the
The
sea.
water. Mm.
So, Annie, how would you feel if you were delayed for a flight and you had to lie on the floor like these people that we saw in the picture?
Yeah, actually, I had this experience in real life, actually. But it was at the beginning. It would be stressful day, but at the time I was lucky because when the flight was delayed, it is blessing in disguise because I can spend time with new friends, like acquaintance at the airport, practice English with many people there. So I will always take advantage of any situation.
So you would make the most of your time, you wouldn't waste it, and you would try to make new acquaintances while you're waiting in the airport. You would use it as an excuse to talk to people. And you, Alan, to finish for today, how would you feel if you had to camp out in an airport for a couple of hours?
Well, obviously, I wouldn't be very happy at all. And at my age, I don't relish sleeping on the floor. My back aches like hell. So I wouldn't be very happy. But all you can do is, like Annie said, maybe make the best of it. Try and make friends, chat with somebody, which invariably will happen. People will make remarks, looking at their watches, how much longer is it going to be and all that. And you do tend to strike up a conversation before you realize it, really. And you can meet some very nice people and have good friends. And in some cases, you really even exchange telephone numbers and you keep in touch. So it's amazing how one thing leads to another. But
Right.
yes, I won't use what I want to say, but I would be very disappointed.
Right. So you would be disappointed at the beginning, but you would try to make the most of a bad situation
Yes, absolutely.
and try to do something to make the time go faster. Right then, guys, thanks for helping me today to talk about this, the nightmare holiday. And let's hope we never have anything similar to this. So,
Absolutely.
toodaloo.